5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's go. Good morning, Misfits. All right, we are about to have on, I would say, my most, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, I would say that this is the most famous guest, I guess you could say. Like, it's, and famous to me, it's not really like, you know, I could have on, you know, some Hollywood actor and I still would think that it wasn't as cool as this. But here we go. No introduction needed. Dinesh D'Souza, ladies and gentlemen. How you doing, sir?
Hey, I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
All right, great. Yeah, you know, I was just saying, it's like I think that there's a lot of people that would love to have on, you know, like Taylor Swift or some shit. And for me, I was excited to have you on because I knew who you are before we started conversing, and I remember sitting down with my buddy and watching 2000 Mules and sort of introducing you to him, and he was like, oh my god, this is great. You've done that documentary on Obama, and now this new one, the Dragon's Prophecy. It's very near and dear to my heart. I'm not sure if you follow my story, but after October 7th I started speaking out and I blew up because of it, because apparently there's not a lot of Christians that stand with the Jewish people, and this is coming from the Jewish people to me, right? I would have thought that would have been common sense, but apparently it's not.
You know, I came of age in American politics in the 1980s and worked briefly in the Reagan White House in my early 20s. And, you know, the strategic case for being allied with Israel seemed obvious. In fact, seemed obvious to both parties. This was one issue on which, by and large, Republicans and Democrats agreed. There was a small faction on the left. I remember there was a scholar at Columbia, Edward Said, Palestinian origin, and he was trying to make the case that the Jews were colonizers. But it was really uphill, you know, climb for him because it seemed so contrary to the facts on the ground. I mean, the Jews were there for thousands of years. The Muslims come around in the 7th century and conquer the place. They build a victory arch, the Dome of the Rock, right on the site of the Solomonic Temple. So, you know, who's the invader? Who's the occupier? Who's the colonizer? So Said had to do a lot of backward somersaults, a lot of pirouettes, and it seemed very implausible.
Yeah.
Now, it's really remarkable to see how far we've come, in which the kind of anti-Jewish, anti-Israel position is not only now mainstream on the left, but you've got this kind of loud and I would say influential faction on the right, far from being the mainstream on the right. But all of this, I agree, took me, I think, by surprise, no less than you. We're both coming at it from the Christian perspective. In fact, Israel hasn't even traditionally been my main issue. I've never written a book about it. I haven't made a film about it until now. And I've been drawn into this partly just because of the you know, the absurdity of the situation and the fact that that I have not seen this kind of anti-Jewish and anti-Israel sentiment on my own side, you know, in my entire adult life.
Yeah. You know, I say it all the time. I said, you know, after October, I thought I saw a little bit of the, you know, the quote right. We call them the woke right, which I'm very proud to say I was saying before James Lindsay. And I say it all the time. I said, I thought this would last a week. I thought that they'd be like, oh, okay, there's going to be pushback and they'll back off, but they didn't. You know, I do want to play the trailer for this film in case anybody hasn't seen what it's about. Unfortunately, on your end, you're not going to be able to hear but it's your movie. I'm sure you know what they're saying. So real quick, let's run through this and then we'll jump into it. Okay. So this is the Dragon's Prophecy trailer.
Then another sign appeared in heaven. An enormous red dragon. Revelation 12:3.
Once again, an armed attack in the Middle East, but this time it's different.
October 7th was the Devil's Holiday. It's very hard to believe what happened, even though I was there and seeing with my own eyes and seeing them laughing and killing and having fun with it.
Because if you don't open the door, they are going to kill you and they are going to kill me, so please open the door.
So who are the Jews? Who are the Palestinians? And whose land is it really? Could the fate of the world, of humanity itself, be somehow tied to this place?
The nation of Israel is a resurrected nation. So what if there was going to be a resurrection of another people, an enemy people of Israel? The Bible speaks about this whole war as a dragon representing the enemy, attacking a woman representing Israel.
The civilian deaths on both sides represent victories on the part of the dragon.
Hamas did everything within their ability to maximize the civilian casualty.
We came back to a land that was largely barren and empty, and we brought it back to life, and we're going to keep it.
The devil hates the Jewish people because they represent the existence of God.
Because without that Jewish foundation, there is no Christianity.
If we're approaching the end of time, God will reveal himself more and more dramatically.
Speak back through the stones.
The story that they've been telling is that Israel is a colonial project. The problem with that is the city of David. We are an inconvenient truth.
Are you aware of any significant archaeological finding that contradicts the Bible?
No.
God's word stands firm. The dragon will not prevail.
Your message here is become a dragon slayer.
Based on Jonathan Cahn's #1 international bestseller,
Okay,
The Dragon's Prophecy.
that trailer is just is amazing, and I tried to watch this last night. For some reason, the link wasn't working, but I have been slammed all week. But I'm going to actually watch the full film tonight. But can you explain to me what the dragon's prophecy in the Bible is actually expressing?
It's based on a passage in the book of Revelation where a dragon representing the devil goes to war with a woman representing Israel, and the woman is pregnant to bear a child representing the Messiah. And so this is not just a metaphor, but in some ways a prophecy, a prophetic image of what we are seeing in the world around us. So the film moves between politics and the Bible. It moves between the past and the present. It hints at the future. It's a very ambitious film, different than my earlier films, which have generally focused in one way or another on the meaning of America.
Yeah.
This takes in a much wider compass. And its theme is that there is a great battle between good and evil, God and the devil, that is going on and has reverberated since the beginning of time. And the events we see in front of us are a kind of projection or reflection of this larger struggle. So even something like anti-Semitism, which people have tried to understand in secular terms, what are its motives? Is it rooted in envy? The film makes the point that the kind of natural explanation for these things is useful, but insufficient. One has to draw on this kind of larger spiritual explanation, if you will, to supplement the natural one. So the film, I think, is it's very riveting. It's got unseen footage of October 7th, quite a bit of it, by the way. And it moves between the gritty realities on the ground, survivors of October 7th, for example, scenes of Gaza, to some of the loftiest themes. And there's also a section kind of on biblical archaeology, basically showing, not only validating, by the way, the Bible, but also establishing the presence of the Jews in their ancient homeland, going back 1,000 years.
It seems like such common sense because, like, again, from a Christian perspective, I was born and raised Christian. I went to Italy and saw the Pope in 2000. I was baptized. I've lived Christianity, and I feel like there's a lot of people, especially a couple of prominent people, I think like Tucker, Candace, who are what I would say they're baby Christians. They got into Christianity recently, and I think that I call them Chat GPT Christians, because I think they misinterpret, or they just don't have that deep-rooted faith. They're taking it more from like a the Talmud says Jesus is boiling in human shit and stuff like that, and they completely misrepresent the Bible. And I think that you have to have that length of Christianity and true Christianity, or else you will misinterpret some of the Word of God. Like, for instance, I've known that the Bible has basically never been contradicted from an archaeological standpoint. It was written, on like, I think it was like 9 different continents, 66,000 cross references before they could travel across. And then for some reason, they have the exact Word of God in 2 different parts of the world, almost word for word. It seems like there's a lot of the prophecies that are written in the Bible that have either come true, or at least can be argued have come true. Yet, people will still sort of make the claim that because they typed in a passage to Grok, it means something completely different.
I think what's going on with Tucker and Candace, I don't think that either of them have a genuine interest in kind of getting the Bible right, or figuring out the relationship of the Old Testament to the New. They don't operate like that. I think rather they have an objective. And the objective ultimately is to discredit, to demonize, to bash the Jews, and to bash Israel, right?
Yeah.
So now they sit around and think, how do I do that? Well, one of the things I need to do is I need to take evangelical Christian support for Israel and sow the seeds of confusion and division and chaos.
Yes.
Because I want to befuddle these people. And to be honest, look, a lot of pastors, unfortunately, don't teach the connection between the Old Testament and the New. They don't go into history.
Yeah.
They don't go into archaeology. So a lot of evangelical Christians have a kind of instinctive bias in favor of Israel. They're naturally inclined. They realize Jesus was, of course, a Jew, and he celebrated Passover, and he walked the pilgrimage road, and he went to the temple. So they know those things, but they are not equipped. So that when Tucker and Candace kind of wade into this and start hitting people with replacement theology, you find that the Christians, no less than Tucker, are on sort of unprepared soil. And so it's like the ignorant are talking to the ignorant. And the whole thing is a little bit of a sad mess.
Supersessionism and replacement theology it's the easiest thing, because they just, like I said, they literalize it. But even in the Bible, it says several different times that there are going to be people that misquote the Bible and take, like Jeremiah 23. It's like there are going to be people that take God's word and twist it against the believers of God.
If you want to make the case, and look, there was in the early centuries after Christ a movement that, I don't know if it used the term replacement theology, but it very much emphasized the sort of new era inaugurated by Jesus. And I think all Christians would agree that Jesus's birth and crucifixion, resurrection were absolutely transformational, and a kind of new pathway to salvation is opened up through faith in Christ. Christ, of course, doing a substitutionary atonement for our sins. So all Christians really believe this. So there has been a sort of replacement, but it's a replacement in one sense and not in another. So in the one hand, yes, if you're talking about what Augustine would call the city of God, Christians believe that a kind of new era begins with Christ, and the old era is replaced, yes, in that sense. However, there are also very specific sort of land promises that are made in the Bible. And these are not in the city of God. God is not talking about the heavenly city. He's talking about this actual physical piece of land between the two rivers, as he says in the book of Genesis. And there's no indication in the Bible that that is ever reneged, is ever given up, is ever conditional, is ever any of that. And so if you want to make the case that God has basically turned his back on his own promises that were not made, God never said, hey, Jews, listen, if you do A, B, and C, I'll give you the land.
Yeah.
Land is given unconditionally and perpetually. In fact, all land is given perpetually, right? If you buy a piece of land, you're not buying it for 8 years.
Sure.
You're buying it forever. You can give it to your descendants. So this is so really what's happening here, I think, is that a partially valid, a half-truth, if you will, is being pushed.
The best lies.
The Old Testament.
The best lies are rooted in truth. You know, I've been able to come up with a strategy to debunk people, or not debunk, but sort of get a gotcha on them by just asking a simple question: do you think God makes mistakes? Because what a lot of people are arguing is God made a promise and then he broke it. Right? Like if God breaks promises, then God made a mistake. And if God is making mistakes, then he is not infallible, omnipotent, and generally all-knowing. It means that he said, oh, I actually did mess this up. And they don't have a good answer for that one, because there is an everlasting covenant. The Abrahamic covenant, this is what I believe in. I believe the Abrahamic covenant is forever. So replacement theology just doesn't compute with me, because it would mean that God replaced something that he said he wouldn't. And that's just my, sort of dummy way to do it. But, gotcha moments and clapbacks, they're entertaining. However, I do try to get into the actual knowledge behind it, and what you're doing is very helpful by creating these documentaries. But we did touch on the people like Tucker. You got Megyn Kelly, Candace Owens, all these people. Do you think the woke right, and that's what I'm calling it, by the way, you can call it the dissident right, you can call it non-interventionist, you can call it a slew of different things, right? I would say the woke right is more Nick Fuentes and the Groypers, and I saw your debate with him. It was amazing. Tucker Carlson is sort of beside that, but let's just say the dissident right. Do you think that they're actually a threat to MAGA, or do you think that they're being challenged enough where this will fade out?
Initially, it seemed that they were going largely unchallenged. Not totally unchallenged, but the voices against them were small, isolated. I think a lot of mainstream figures on the right were reluctant to step into it. They had the view that, look, say what you will, these guys have a huge following. Probably, our following overlaps with theirs. We don't want to antagonize our own supporters.
Audience capture that
was clearly a factor. Some of it was also, I think, an attachment to the old Tucker, to the old Candace, to the old Megyn. I'll give you an example. When I had my campaign finance case with the Obama administration, the administration was ruthlessly going after me using the full power of the U.S. government. Megyn Kelly was very much in my corner, gave me tremendous access to her show, was, a very powerful voice on my side at a time when I really needed it. Yeah. At a time when some of my other, I had some liberal friends from my Washington, D.C. days, and they would come up to me privately and go, oh, Dinesh, man, you're really being shafted. And I was like, well, EJ, you write for the Washington Post. It'd be really nice for you to write a column that said that. Oh, no, they wouldn't do that. They were all, in the end, loyal sort of slaves or loyal soldiers of Obama. So I really appreciated what Megyn did. And I'm very reluctant as a consequence to speak out against her. These are people that, I've known over the years. I also think that their motives are all very different. Candace is a very different character than Bannon, Matt Gaetz.
I think Candace is motivated by schizophrenia, but that's just me.
Well, she's running this very bizarre shtick. which is masquerading as a kind of, I call it the CIA, the Candace Intelligence Agency.
Yeah.
There's an element of the Pink Panther in it, of course.
Yeah.
There's a comedic element to it, although her followers don't see it that way.
No.
It's almost like they're the audience and they're part of the movie because they're part of the comedy. They follow the plot. They look for new revelations. Of course, the question to ask, and I think over time people are bound to ask it, has Candace produced a single relevant, important, and verifiable fact? Forget about solving a case.
Not really.
Important discovery that helps us to at least get one step closer to solving a case, and I mean any case.
Well, here's what she'll do is she'll say, "I did provide a fact. I said I had a text from somebody that Charlie was turning on Israel, and then I produced that text," right? So that's her fact. Her fact is an out of context private message that was leaked to her from somebody. And she says, because I said I was going to do something one time and then I did it, that means that I'm credible. I call this the 95-5 rule of conspiracy theorists, right? 95% of the shit they say is only 5% true, and 5% of the shit they say is 95% true. So like on the good side, that would be like COVID, right? They got COVID right. And it's like, oh, COVID was definitely some type of, shady operation. Or they say something like, oh, the Tower 7 was blown up. And then they use that one time, that 5% of the time that they're quote right, to credit themselves for 95% of the shit they say that's wrong. And that's Candace, that's Alex Jones, that's Ian Carroll, that's all of them. So that's going to be what she always uses. But they largely are ignored about the 95% of the things they say that are just either not true, half truths, or not even half truths. But that's what I would say is her saving grace. That's how they continue, I guess.
The odd thing, and I don't know if this is your experience with regard to Tucker, is that I find that even his most ardent defenders, even I like Bill Maher's phrase for him, the oldest living groyper, but even the younger groypers who are very, pro Tucker won't defend his actual views.
No.
They won't. So if you say to them, all right, well, do you agree with Tucker about Maduro?
Mm-hmm.
Do you agree with Tucker about the benign aspect of Sharia law? Do you agree with Tucker that Hamas is really not a terrorist group? It's a political organization. I notice that they're very uncomfortable. They start kind of hemming and hawing. Their defense of Tucker is either based upon we used to like the old Tucker, or it's based upon the idea that don't cancel Tucker, Dinesh. Why are you trying to cancel Tucker?
Yeah. Everyone thinks that criticism is now cancellation. I've been through cancellation. You've been through cancellation, right? This is not cancellation. It's critique. We are not demanding anybody, we're not doxing people. We're not demanding anybody be fired, et cetera, et cetera. I do like the way that you framed it, where it's like holding on to the old, because I had a lot of people telling me to like denounce Tucker. And even I was not doing it at first, because I was holding on to that old Tucker. Candace, I loved what Candace was doing with TPUSA, with Blexit. Megyn Kelly, huge fan. Tucker, huge fan. But then you see the shift, and at what point do you say, okay, I've seen enough evidence where, and Ben Shapiro put this beautifully at AmFest and in other situations, where he said, at what point do you consider yourself a coward because you're just doing it because for the sake of this quote friendship or loyalty or what have you?
There was a kind of a standard, intellectual standard that existed in the old days before the age of social media, but it's a very good standard that is worth preserving. People are entitled to change their mind. But if you make a radical U-turn,
yes.
Let's say, for example, you used to be a communist and now you're a capitalist.
Yes.
You've essentially gone in not only a new direction, but an opposite direction. Then it is very incumbent on you to give an explanation for this deep change of heart.
Yes.
I mean, this is really why Solzhenitsyn, for example, wrote his autobiography. In some ways, it explains the Gulag Archipelago. Solzhenitsyn is giving a massive accounting. And at the end of it, you understand. Whittaker Chambers the same. His great book, Witness, talks about how he came from the communist camp into essentially became a kind of right-winger. Now, Tucker has done this. He's made the U-turn. You can play his old videos, and they are the opposite of what he's saying now. But he's never given any kind of accounting whatsoever. He's never
why?
said,
Yeah.
you know, I used to like Israel, and then I discovered this and this and this. No. His masquerade, he too has a masquerade. It's a different one than Candace. His masquerade is, and it's not even verbal. It's a combination of Tucker having a certain type of guest, asking a certain type of question, putting on a quizzical expression on his face, scratching his head, saying things like, well, that's really interesting. It's a whole, almost like a staged routine.
And I think that's the reason why Tucker is still accepted by so many people. And I think that the biggest, I mean, I don't want to, like, you know, overstate something that's not really that big, but I do believe that Tucker is the biggest problem. I'm not saying he's a huge problem, but it's because he's still very well liked by Don Jr., people in the administration, people up high. And if his intentions are what a lot of critics, myself included, think it is, then that's dangerous, because he is in close proximity to people in power. And it's like Candace Owens, nobody takes her seriously. Candace Owens is never going to be in social circles with people that they can, you know, whisper little things into their ear. And I think that that's the reason why Tucker, to me, feels like the biggest threat.
Yes, I agree. And I would add to that the fact that Tucker has evidently, and I don't think that I was aware of this at the beginning, has been attempting to kind of, I won't say take over is an excessive word, but essentially create a sort of alliance with powerful conservative institutions, the Heritage Foundation, Kevin Roberts, TP USA. And he does this in a fairly kind of brazen way, right?
Yes.
I mean, if we know that there's one guy that Charlie Kirk did not want to platform in the world, it's Nick Fuentes.
Yes.
So who does Tucker kind of do this kind of salivating, sycophantic interview with? Nick Fuentes. And it's almost like daring TP USA. Listen, you know, you can't do anything about it. You know, I am the sort of new golden boy of TP USA. I'm the sort of legitimate heir to Charlie, if you will.
Sure.
There's clearly something of this sort going on. And you can tell that when you look at the reaction of TP USA, the reaction of Heritage, they're a little immobilized by Tucker. So
because he's using a shield. He's using a shield of free speech. He's saying, I didn't say. I'm just interviewing people, like you said.
Yes, and he's also, in a sense, saying that, I think this is what he's saying to TP USA, that I have the capture of your own young supporters. They are in my camp, not in Charlie's camp. And so your best survival path is to embrace a certain type of modified Groyperism. I am the future and not you.
That's actually, I didn't think of it that way, but you're absolutely right. He could be essentially saying, well, I've already done it. I've already caught, and TPUSA, I don't think handled this as well as I think that some people wanted them to, where they fired back with this whole, we do not cancel people, we do not censor people, we do not this, we do not that. No, again, nobody asked you to. We're not, but then when I saw them bring on Ben Shapiro right after Erica Kirk and saw his speech, I think you and I both know that you can't really get away with doing something like that unless they kind of already know you're going to do it. I think that Ben Shapiro made it very clear what he was going to say, or at least TPUSA knew that he was going to say something along those lines. So that comforted me, even though they still had Tucker on. I also make the argument that you can't be too heavy on TPUSA because they've had Cenk Uyghur on speaking at AmFest. They've had people that they vehemently disagree with speaking at TPUSA events. I think that they're leaning in a little bit too hard to the free speech thing, though, because what happens is you come across as complacent with Tucker's positions when you don't push back on him, when it's one side, when it's a little heavier on the Groyper side. Nobody's saying don't platform. We're saying if you platform, push back. If you don't agree with Tucker, make it very well known. Then you have Jack Prosobic taking pictures with Myron Gaines and letting him in. There's a difference between cancel culture and what I think a lot of people on the right are doing, which is saying, define yourself. Let us know who you are.
Look, no one has had a conversation with Tucker in which what is now a wide array of positions has never even asked him about it. That has never happened.
That's all. That's all it takes.
That's all it takes, right? So, in other words, the reason I didn't like what TPUSA did is because Tucker very much wants it to be Tucker and Candace against the Jews.
Yes.
So he loves it when up against him is Mark Levin or Ben Shapiro, because this makes it seem like this is some kind of that these are Jews who are sort of pushing for the Jewish interest.
Yes.
They're Israel first. And so what Tucker does not like is, and the reason I think Charlie Kirk was a problem for Tucker, is this is Christian support for Jews and for Israel. This is making the case from the Christian point of view and the America First point of view.
Yes.
So that did not happen on the TPUSA stage. That's what really needed to happen, because all these young people who follow Tucker are going to profess in some way or another to be Christians.
Yes.
And so the way to reach them is really to say, what are you really saying? Are you actually saying that Jesus was not, in fact, a Jew?
Yes.
He saw himself as a Christian.
Jesus
Jesus founded a new company called Christianity and proclaimed himself the first member of that group. I mean, what are you actually saying?
It's so wild because it's the number one thing that you could just use to shut down the argument, but not a lot of people do it. I'm like, listen, true or false, Jesus was a Torah observant Jew, and Christianity didn't even exist until 300 years after his death. All of the apostles. So like when they make the argument, the Jews killed Jesus, I go, okay, who killed the apostles? Right? Because if the Jews did in fact kill Jesus, and it was not the Romans definitely killed his buddies, and it is very silly that they take that route. I know that we have limited time here. I did want to get on one final topic. You had this amazing moment in your debate with Nick Fuentes where you explained about how regime change is actually sometimes a good thing. Sometimes it works out. The situation in Iran right now, it would be essentially regime change if it's successful. The threat to Islam in the West, with Khomeini being the #1 state sponsor of terrorism. Can you explain a little bit about what you were saying in that debate where you said something about like Santana and other regimes that change? Because there's a concerning amount of people on the right that are going full isolationists as opposed to non-interventionists. And I think that that's dangerous. I said it on my show yesterday. I go, the recipe for the death of America would be to become a full isolationist. Because while you think that you're trying to do the right thing by not intervening, what you're doing is creating a vacuum that will be taken over by China, Russia, North Korea, etc. Go into that regime change argument, if you wouldn't mind, again.
Sure. The governing principle of foreign policy, and I would argue to some degree of life, is the principle of the lesser evil.
Yes.
And the principle of the lesser evil says that in trying to get rid of the bad guy, make sure you don't get the worst guy.
Sure.
Another corollary of the same principle is it's sometimes permissible to ally with a flawed guy or even a bad guy to oppose someone who is far worse, or poses a greater danger at the time. By the way, this was
Stalin, Hitler, yeah.
That was exactly. And also the way we got Iran, the way we got Khomeini's Iran, is because Jimmy Carter campaigned on human rights in '76. And Carter said, the Shah is a bad guy. He's got a secret police. We've got to pull the Persian rug out from under him. So we got rid of the allegedly bad guy, the Shah. And who did we get? The worst guy, Khomeini. Now, with regard to regime change, there are really two things to look at. One is, what is the likely outcome if a government falls? Is it going to be better, or is it going to be worse? And usually when we say that, we mean it in two senses. Is it better for the people, and is it better for the United States?
Sure.
So the first is the sort of humanitarian view, or call it the moral view. The second is the strategic or the realpolitik view. So I don't believe the United States should get involved where we don't have any interests at all.
I think Maduro would be the best example of that.
Yeah, in the case of Maduro, for example, our interests are not strong enough, for example, to commit troops or to try to occupy them.
I agree.
Trump understands that. On the other hand, what we're doing, what we should do, I think, is some version of the Reagan doctrine. And the Reagan doctrine is very much based on the idea that, listen, we don't fight for other people's freedom. They need to fight, but we help. We saw this with the Mujahideen in Afghanistan. The Soviets invade. The United States does not commit troops, but rather supports the Mujahideen. We give them all kinds of handheld rockets to shoot down Soviet helicopters. It works beautifully. The Soviets are chased out of Afghanistan. Regime change.
Yeah, exactly.
Outcome.
And not to mention, if it's successful, you owe us all that money for those weapons. It's
well. Yeah. So my sense about Fuentes was that he's very glib and kind of suave and self-confident, but his examples come down to like one, maybe two.
Yeah.
So in the vast sweep of history, with 100 years behind him, his best examples are, like, I would say Iraq is his best example, and he's got a sort of a half a point on Afghanistan. And essentially, his historical knowledge comes to an end at that point.
Well, that's like the Dave Smith's argument, everybody's argument. It's just Iraq. And it's like, hey, Trump isn't Bush. That's all you have. All you have to acknowledge is that these are two different people, two different situations. That's it.
Well, and go back to, say, the Gulf War of the 90s, where you pulverize Saddam Hussein, you eject him from Kuwait. Regime change. Was the outcome good? Of course it was. Even in Iraq, although there was no connection to 9/11, just looked at it on its own. If the United States went in there, pulverized Saddam Hussein, ejected him from power, and then found some rival gang, some rival tribe, and said to them, hey, why don't you take over? And all we're asking of you is that basically you be more pro-American than this guy. And they would probably happily have agreed, happily have done that, and things would have been better. Now, of course, the error was not in the regime change. The error was in this next element introduced by Condoleezza Rice and Colin Powell. And it was so dumb. I mean, I remember when I first heard it, I was like, what are you even saying? They were saying it's kind of like the store with the sign that says, if you break it, you gotta own it.
Yes.
You gotta, and I was like, no, who ever thought like that?
Yeah.
If we to get rid of a bad guy, we don't own their country. It's not our job to go and fix their schools or give them all jobs. So this is the kind of absurdist element of Bushism, particularly George W. Bushism. We're obviously all against that, but that's really not what Trump is all about at all.
Exactly, and that's what I keep trying to tell people. It's like, look, if Bush was in the White House, you'd have an argument. If Obama was in the White House, you'd have an argument. Trump's in the White House. We did 4 years of Trump, no new wars. He did plenty of intervention. He killed the top 2 terrorists in the world, right? He bombed like al-Baghdadi, Soleimani. He sent a dog in to eat one of them. No war, right? And this is what people are doing. They're creating a false equivalency between Bush Republican and Trump peace through strength. So
I was a little bit concerned when, Trump did that beautiful strike on the Iran nuclear facilities,
Yes.
and it looked like the mullahs were about to fall, and it looked like Israel was perfectly willing to do the job of toppling them. It looked like Trump was holding Netanyahu back.
Yeah, he did. I think so.
And so I was like, man, this is a case where I think Trump needs to be a little more interventionist, or at least give Israel the green light. He didn't do that. But now I think, there's a concatenation of circumstances. Even Venezuela, I think, has played a role in emboldening the Iranian protesters.
Of course.
And so I think now we have this is a unique opportunity. These don't come along very often. This is the first one in 45 years.
Yeah.
To see the mullahs go down.
What do you think is going to happen? Well, what do you think is going to happen? Let's say, if the Iranian people are successful? I think we're all assuming that Trump is going to help them in some capacity, like you said. Let's say this is successful. Do you think that there would be a benefit of, like, let's say, Trump coming in and trying to create some type of, situation like he's planning to do it in Venezuela, where he goes, look, it's your country. We're not putting boots on the ground, but we're going to assist in getting you a proper leadership. Or do you think we should let them topple him and then stay out of it and let the chips fall where they may?
Well, I think in the case of Iran, they are fully capable of running their own society. But we do have a situation in Iran, same as Venezuela, which is that over a quarter century, in the case of Iran, almost half a century, all the institutions, every school is run by someone loyal to the mullahs. So they have infiltrated the full hierarchy of society. And so rooting that out is going to be difficult. It's going to take a time. I do think that the United States can provide, you could call it the air cover for this to happen.
Sure.
But it's going to have to be the Iranians who do it,
Sure.
and the Venezuelans in their case as well. So
Yeah.
Fortunately, these things are, the Chavistas run every segment of society. This is why you can't just fly Maria Corina Machado back and say, take over your country.
Yeah, it's definitely way more nuanced. And like I said, I think the theme of I would say the ignorant people that comment on this stuff. And you're more educated than me, but I'm more educated than them. Where it's just this binary of regime change bad, this. It's the same thing they do with Christianity, just non-contextualization. I think it's definitely going to be difficult, but I think it's also, like you said, an opportunity for almost a half century in Iran, almost a quarter century in Venezuela, more than a quarter century in Venezuela. Venezuela was number 3 economy in the hemisphere. They were doing manufacturing, and now they're eating out of the garbage. I think that there is an opportunity for at least the start of a positive trend in both countries, which doesn't happen without U.S. intervention. And that is my point.
The good news for us is that, my wife is Venezuelan. I know a lot about Venezuela. The Venezuelans and the Iranians are two of the most patriotic people in the world.
Yeah.
I know lots of them in both camps, and they will give their lives for their country in a heartbeat.
They are.
These are people, and these are not people, by the way. Almost every Venezuelan who has come to the United States, has fled to the United States, has the view, I'm ready to go back to Venezuela as soon as there's the opportunity to do that. So these are people that are actually aching to go back to a country that they're very attached to.
Yeah.
And so, this gives you a lot of reason for optimism, because these are people who have the will. They have, in some cases, the money. They have the knowledge. They know how to run their own society. They were running it before.
Sure.
And they know how to do it again. So this is not the same as, that pathetic scene of U.S. commanders are trying to somehow organize a jirga or tribal meeting in the wilds of Afghanistan, trying to tell people what an election means and how they should vote.
Yes.
And why
that's
it's not
I don't think we want that either. It's
right.
Not,
so that there's a certain kind of, how we got into that and how intelligent, this is, I think, what's really discredited the neocons, how intelligent people could partake of that kind of comic scene. That's a scene that like the comedian Aristophanes would have found really amusing. People from one country sitting around explaining to people from another country.
So this is how you do it.
Century,
Yeah.
how a complex system of constitutional republicanism should work.
Yeah.
I mean, gee, this could be a laugh out loud type of Hollywood production if Hollywood had the was smart enough to make it.
I know you got to go. I just said it yesterday on my show. I go, look, if you guys think that freedom in Iran means American freedom or any type of situation where these other countries look like all of a sudden, like, overnight become like American with free speech and this, that, and the other. That's a ridiculous ask. What we're hoping for is Islam, like the UAE or something like that, where it's like they still don't have rights, but they have more rights, like a lot more.
Well, there's democracy, and then there is, classical liberalism, and those two things are not the same.
Correct.
And they both have a lot of benefits if they're done in the right way. So let's just say, for example, the Iranian people want to bring back the Shah. He would be a sort of constitutional monarch.
Yeah.
And you might think, oh my gosh, we are back to monarchy. Well,
Yeah.
the truth of it is that if you have a monarch who, on the other hand, is open to classical liberalism, which, by the way, the earlier Shah was also. He was trying to liberalize his society. Now, maybe in some ways he went too fast, or maybe he ran afoul of the traditional sentiments of the people. Those are possibilities. In Venezuela, the good news is that the Venezuelan model was, to some degree, modeled on America. Their constitutional system, they don't even have the parliamentary democracy of most of the European countries. Their system is a presidential one, just like ours.
Yeah. Final question before I get you out of here. What is the threat that Islam poses on the West, and how do we do our best to prevent it from, metastasizing?
The threat of Islamic infiltration of the West, I think, is a more difficult one to deal with than the threats of, say, ISIS or Al Qaeda or Boko Haram, because it is a sort of subterfuge. The Islamic radicals, or the Islamists, whatever you call them, are traveling on the passport of American freedom. So let's take an example, and this is hypothetical, but it's not that far off from things that we're seeing all around us. Let's say the Muslims say, we want to buy 1,000 acres of land in Texas, and we want to create a giant Islamic madrasa for young Muslim boys to instruct them in Sharia, instruct them in the caliphate, instruct them really in the kind of precepts of Islam as we understand it. Now, I'm not even talking here, by the way, about the Red-Green Alliance or the fact that the left enabled. I'm just saying there are a lot of people in Texas, conservatives, who would say, well, this is horrible.
I'm in Texas, and we have that in Dallas, where they're trying to...
So you have in a red state conservatives who say, what do we do about this? And here's the problem. The Muslims will say, well, you obviously can't do anything about it because...
Freedom of religion.
Freedom of speech, freedom of assembly. Don't you believe in private education? That's what we're doing. Don't you believe in private property? We're buying the land with our own money. So you have no basis based on your own system of government and your own Bill of Rights to oppose us.
Yeah.
This, I think, is the issue that the right is going to have to think through. I think I might do a film on this topic generally this year. I'm just putting the ideas for it together. But in my view, this is really the nub of it. It is on what basis do you oppose a group of illiberal people who have an illiberal destination, but are getting from here to there on the back of liberalism itself?
Yeah, I mean, because Islam is a sword, and they use your shield, right? That's what they do. They take your freedom of religion, freedom of speech, and they use it against you, right? They're infiltrating, and then they're going, no, you can't be Islamophobic because it's your own system that we're trying to adhere by, and it's bullshit. Dinesh, thank you so much. This was amazing. Like I said, I could have had whoever. Tom Cruise could have been like, I want to be on your show. And if it contradicted with you, you would have been on. I appreciate it. Can you let everybody know where to find you? Obviously, we got the Dragon's Prophecy. I put that in. Angel Studios has got that on their website. And anything else that you want to promote?
It's on iTunes. You can get DVDs at Amazon, Walmart. The website for the film is thedragonsprophecyfilm.com. Follow me on X at Dinesh D'Souza. And I'm going to be... I'm not doing my daily podcast anymore, but I'm launching a new show, which will begin in February. So keep an eye out for that. It's just going to be the Dinesh Show.
Absolutely, sir. Thank you so much. And I appreciate it. Anytime you want to come back, let me know.
Look forward to it. Thank you.
All right. Have a good one. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was Dinesh D'Souza, sorry. And I had, look, I had all these questions, but we agreed on 45 minutes. He gave me a couple extra minutes, and I got through all of them. So it was actually very successful to get all those. The only thing that I think that I would have loved to have more time on is the Islam thing, because as I've been saying, right, there's no problem with Muslims. It's not a Muslim thing. It's an Islam thing. And I think that you can take the situation in Iran right now as proof that obviously there's no, animosity towards Muslims. I want the people of Iran to overthrow the government. I want the Muslims to win. I do not want the Islamists to win. That's the difference. But I got to head out to work, and I think that this was a great show. It's usually Woke Wednesdays, but we didn't do that, obviously. But tomorrow, we are going to be bringing Hate Mail Thursday back. And tonight, I think Sean will be available for the weekly breakdown. We're going to be bringing that back as well. A couple of weeks where we haven't really, obviously the holiday, and then I had to take the first week off to get back to work. But let's do the shout-outs like we always do at the end of every show. We got Cincy Rock Sandy. Oh, Film Matters, he's not the only one. Yes, we did talk about that. We got Sandy in the chat. 00 deleted. Looks like a hater, maybe. Film What Matters. Eden A. Hopton 70. Scott Gibb 1. Roadrunner 513. 7 Legion Studios. TPH 14. And Georgia Mom 2015. Thank you, everybody, for coming into the live chat. We will see you hopefully tonight. If not,